Assalamu alaikum. I'm Imam Dai Abdullah, the director of LGBT Outreach Program at Muslims for Progressive Values. In this video, we're going to talk about our understanding of mental illness as it was passed down from generation to generation to the modern times. In prehistoric times, the concept of mental illness was considered an invasion of magical spirits or demonic possession. As time went on, we can see the interchanging experiences of the various communities leading up to a completely different viewpoint on the subject. For example, during the age of the Hebrews, we can see how the understanding of the prehistoric peoples in regards to mental illness as a demonic form of illness transforms into a religious experience. And later on, we see how the Greek understanding of mental illness as a physical form of illness interacts with the Jewish understanding of mental illness. In the Muslim community, it was through the translation of Greek texts into Arabic, as well as the Judeo-Christian influences in the Muslim community. That means Muslims whose community contained recent converts from Christianity and Judaism were able to take the understanding of their background faiths and combine it with the Greek understanding of things to come up with new solutions that would later actually become important to modern society. In the Jewish community, as well as the Christian community of the 7th century, mental health was correlated to the laws of God. If you happen to be someone who is experiencing mental health problems, you were seen as sinning against God. This is really mainly because of the fact that in the Jewish community, they had less emphasis on possession simply because they were a community who were more interested in this life. This is still the case today, in the sense that Jews are not so much focused on the hereafter. On the other hand, the Christians were able to use the imagery from the New Testament, which was definitely influenced by Christian theology that had been influenced by the Romans, and to their understanding of mental health, by seeing it as being both demonic possession as well as sins against God. This shows us how this is a transformed viewpoint of Jewish and Roman ideas. However, if you happen to be Muslim, this was different. It wasn't seen so much as sinning against God, but as mental health being a test from God. In other words, you are not being condemned necessarily for sinning, but you were just being tested as a Muslim. We can see how this is a transformed viewpoint from the Jewish influence. That being said, we can also see how the Christian understanding of mental health transformed itself from one of being demonic possession to jinn possession. So depending upon whether you are living in a community with more Christian converts or Jewish converts, one's understanding of mental health was totally dependent upon these interacting beliefs. In the Golden Age, things were done a lot differently because the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age had translated texts from various groups of people, including the Persians, Egyptians, as well as Greeks. This allowed the Muslim society to have access to diverse and conflicting medical information. The Muslims are able to take the information that they already had, which was the influence of Jewish and Christian, and combine it with their newly acquired information from the Greek texts to further create a more balanced viewpoint of mental health, one that had both physical and mental components. During this time, we know from history that there were at least 3 major hospitals dedicated to mental health. These hospitals had medical capabilities that were definitely ahead of their time, in the sense that they had wards that treated various different kinds of mental illnesses. One of these hospitals was in Baghdad and was built in 705 Common Era, another one in Cairo, and a third one in Fez. All of these were constructed before 850 Common Era. During the same time in Europe, there had been a lot of interest in this new information found and translated by Muslims in the Arab world. This led to some of these texts being translated into Latin in Europe. about 500 years after they were first applied in the Muslim world. In the 18th century, as well as the 19th century, Europe had begun to be interested in the scientific understanding of mental health. During this time, the birth of psychology as we understand it today had come into being. This led to the rapid growth of the field, so much so that in the 20th century, psychology became one of the fastest growing scientific fields in the world. In the 19th century, religious and secular views about same-sex coupling derived a new term, homosexuality. Europe and the West codified it into law, thus making non-heterosexual sexual acts punishable. For about 150 years, this was the status quo throughout the known world. In 1973, the American Psychological Association declassified homosexuality as a mental illness, and over the past 40 years, decriminalization of homosexuality has started to take place. In conclusion, we can see how viewpoints can change in various parts of history simply because various types of people come in contact with each other. Whether this contact took place the way the Hebrews inherited their viewpoints on mental health from the Egyptians and later mixed that with information that they had received from their own religion, Muslims too had inherited their understanding of mental health through the combination of their Jewish and Christian backgrounds, as well as the Greek information they had inherited in the Islamic Golden Age. Similarly, we can see how that same Muslim information ended up influencing the Judeo-Christian Western world in the 13th century throughout the 20th century. This reminds us that we are all more connected and therefore influenced by each other than we think.